Welcome back. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari's victory in the 2015 presidential election is generally believed to have been anchored on the fight against corruption. Majority of those who voted for him did so because they had the strong belief in him to stem the tide of corruption, which was rampant in the government he took over from. A lot has indeed happened on that front, I should say, since the president came to power. Massive recoveries of looted funds have been made from former government officials. Several of them are standing trial in court, including 7 judges of the Supreme Court. But the latest report by corruption watchdog Transparency International says Nigeria is not doing enough to deal with corruption. In fact, the body says the perception of corruption in Nigeria worsened between 2016 and 2017. The country is ranked 148 out of 180 countries assessed in 2017. Transparency International's annual corruption perception index, as a CPI. That's the ranking. Now, in 2016, Nigeria scored 28 points and ranked 136 in the ranking of countries. But the latest ranking showed Nigeria slipped by 12 points from 136 in 2016 to 148 in 2017. On the continent, Nigeria ranks 32nd position out of 52 African countries assessed in 2017. Now, usually the index ranks 180 countries by their perceived level of public corruption, according to experts and, of course, business people. So how much of a blow is this to Nigeria's anti-corruption fight? And just how do you reconcile this with the recent decision of the African Union appointing President Buhari Africa's anti-corruption champion? Joining me to talk more about this is Lanre Suraj, who is the president of Civil Society Network Against Corruption. Lanre, thank you very much for coming on the program. How do you reconcile, what Transparency International has come out with and the decision of the AU now to make President Buhari Africa's anti-corruption champion?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think the both of them are not too far away from each other. There's really no much of contradiction between what the AU decided and then what has been the perception from the TIE perception index. Let us also establish the fact that this is about a perception.
Yeah, of course.
And what you have with AU is more of practical reality of what is being assessed, looking at all the other African countries and then juxtaposing that with what is being done by Nigeria, or which of those leaders is actually championing a kind of reform within the system or in their countries towards the fight against corruption and graft. And what you see, actually, Nigeria eventually dropped by 1 point from 28 to 27. Which is different from when you can juxtapose that actually with the ranking, the number of steps in terms of the ranking.
Yeah, you're right.
It's very high compared to just the number of points that it was dropped, But it also tells you that quite a number of other countries are doing on their own a lot to improve. And it is not that Nigeria is also not doing enough or doing something tangibly between 2016 and 2017. And when you look at, in terms of the law reforms, and you look at the time in terms of policy formulation and also in terms of recovery, you will agree with me that Nigeria has done quite a lot more than what was done in 2016 and 2015, or even the previous government. But the key issues are you still have quite a number of institutional challenges that impedes the achievement of results in the fight against corruption. You look at vis-a-vis the National Assembly, where you still have quite a whole number of delay in the passage of laws that are meant to complement the effort at the fight against corruption. That counts a lot. You look at also the attempt at the judiciary, which is currently ongoing, to reform the judicial and administration of criminal justice process in the judiciary, and the delay that you have with the dispensation of justice. That also counts a lot. And when you look at the lack of thorough independence and impartiality in the judiciary in terms of doing business and adjudication, and also reconciling differences in business conflicts at some times, and also mediation process. It also counts because private sectors and businesses are also part of the assessors that assist in the perception index issue. So when you look at all this, coupled with the breakout of corruption cases that are involving people who are currently serving, you have one of the governors who also sits as also the chairman of the Governors Forum, being accused of some corrupt practices and hoarding properties abroad, diverting money of Paris funds. You have the Senate president, not only standing trial for previous corruption charges, but also accused of diverting funds under the Governors Forum's Paris Club rebate and refund. And you have such cases breaking out of involving current and serving officers of the government. There's no way that the perception would not negatively affect what is going to be the rank with Nigeria, and then what is going to be the perception from outside the country. So there are pockets of situation, basically because we still operate the same political parties that took us to where we were before now. You still have those institutions that are meant to reform the situation still being manned by people who are still of the past. So it will take a gradual process for you to have a concrete form. There's still the failure on the part of the government also to holistically address the fight against corruption. What you've seen happening most is resting with the EFCC most especially, and not replicated in the ICPC and the Code of Conduct Bureau and the other anti-corruption agencies, the Special Fraud Unit, the police, and also a need for the government to start a process of implementing its national anti-corruption strategy. There's a national anti-corruption strategy document.
Exactly, that was actually mentioned,
and there's been really no substance in terms of the concrete implementation of the provisions of those of the national anti-corruption strategy.
I want you to also react to, part of what we have seen in the course of this period is that, and that's one of the accusations against this government, is that it basically targets the opposition and leaves out those who are in government or in the political party that the president belongs to, and that you look at the way the president and the government handled the issue of the former secretary to the government of the Federation. You look at the way the government is currently handling the issue of the head of the National Health Insurance scheme, and you also look at the way the government handled the whole minor gate issue. That you look at all of those, I mean, they just don't give you the impression of a government that is really, genuine, completely genuine now in the fight against corruption.
No, I completely agree with you. And then we'll start, when you have the chief law officer of a country, involved and mention the kind of, such a scandal involving the return of minor back into the country, and then the kind of letters that were written by the Attorney General in support of that kind of a criminal practice and process, of having minor return back into the civil service. And you also have experience with some of the letters that you have between the Attorney General, the EFCC lately, and also the one with the Code of Conduct Tribunal, the EFCC, the Code of Conduct Tribunal chairman, the trial, and it gives you also that sense of also feeling that this is actually not a government that is also clear about what it is trying to do and is willing to do. And there's no doubting the fact that coming from the background of what you see with the NIA DG, the former DSS DG, the attempt by the EFCC to actually bring them to book, and then also the resistance that was put up by the DSS. And you don't have any leadership role that will say this actually should be the law and this should be what happened. Then it also questions the credibility of the government and its genuineness and commitment to the fight against corruption. And which is one thing that I always want to make. The error and the failure of this government cannot be compared to that of the past, even where we still condemn or criticize the government with what happened with the former secretary to the government of the Federation. It wasn't the same thing when you had under the former government. You had a very serious indictment against several officers, including the Minister of Aviation, Stella Odua, who is now a senator in the 8th Assembly of the Senate, was terribly indicted as aviation minister. She was still in office for months, and she wasn't even removed by the president. She resigned and then went to contest for an election to become a senator. So we are saying this is not enough, but we can't go back to the past. That we must establish. And moving forward, we would continuously challenge the government to do the right thing. We would, as much as possible, expose the inadequacies and failures and the fallacies of the government. But it's not like we want to go back to our old practice and experience. No, that is not in any way for us. Even the dropping in the ranking by the TI in the 2017 is still far and over and above and better than what we had in 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, and the rest of that. But for us, the government must understand that these are issues that needs to be addressed. It is not only about the president as the executive. It's also about the National Assembly. It's also about the civil society. It's about the media, and it's also about the judiciary.
So clearly we can say in some of these cases, the president has actually not demonstrated, should I say, good leadership, so to speak.
It's insufficient leadership to actually take charge of the situation and ensure that we get results from the investment that the people have invested in the government, the trust that the people have reposed in government, the vote that the people have given to the government, and also the commitment that the government promised to the people. We are yet to see that sufficient leadership role on the part of the government to rein in all those characters that are undermining the effort of those who are genuinely committed to having reforms in the system.
Another issue I'd want you to comment on is this whole idea of, people saying, look, you're fighting corruption, but up till this moment, nobody has been convicted. There are quite a lot of cases in court. There's no question at all. Quite a lot of cases. The government has taken quite a number of persons to court, but we still haven't had convictions, so to speak, of any of these high-profile individuals now who have been in court for quite a while.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm happy that you're raising it. And it's also going to be a challenge not to the government, and I must be frank with you with that, but to the media and the civil society. Because we are the judiciary. No, at the judiciary. We're actually misplacing our priority and holding responsible holding the wrong end of the stick. We're conscious of the fact that there are some of these cases that have been in court even since 2007 up to date.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you can't even be blaming a government of 2 years of saying you have not concluded a trial of what you have since 2007. The fact is, look at the experience. Let us just take practical experience. You have the case with the current Senate president. He was charged before the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and he had to go on appeal to High Court, an appeal to Court of Appeal, and another appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, there was a judgment which the government appealed, and at the Court of Appeal, they said return to trial for out of 15 charges, return to trial for 3. It's gone to Supreme Court to go and challenge even those 3. Would you be able to blame the anti-corruption agency for that? No. But the most important thing is some of those lawyers who are defense lawyers to many of the suspects explore these tactics to just claim that it is the failure to secure conviction. Meanwhile, they are responsible for that failure, but they hold other people responsible and blame other people. And we make the mistake of also joining them by only asking government, how many convictions have you secured?
And the government cannot convict
cannot convict them. It's only the court. Even when you have the overwhelming evidence. Many of them, you saw how somebody was stretched into the court with a stretcher, saying that he has medical cases and issues. This is somebody that was like few weeks back, was at the convention of a political party, Hale and Hardy, was even angry that he was not allowed into the stage box to sit with the VIPs. But when it's time for trial, he's suddenly so sick that he's unable to walk into the court. So when we see many of those things, we fail to condemn those acts that they cannot even try within our system. We've seen where somebody was tied to court here, and he says, I'm not guilty. He got to the UK and told the court and admitted to the court that, okay, I'm going to plead guilty, because he knew it was, but here, it was frustrating the trial process to the extent that it was a new judgment was almost given by his case, such that you cannot be tried outside the jurisdiction where you committed the offense. Yes. Because he was still claiming he was not guilty, and he got to the UK and pleaded guilty and admitted guilty. We are not looking at many of this. And also going to one of your questions earlier about prosecuting only the opposition. I mean, we've had this, I know how much we had this 2006, 2007, 2005, during Obasanjo's regime and Ribadu. Those that are tried either in opposition or in the ruling party, are they guilty or not? So if you are guilty, what does it matter? That is one. Two, the states where many of them, like they will talk about some former governors, the states have the power to actually prosecute those who are found or suspected to have been guilty of any of those offenses.
The states don't do it.
Then they fail to do it. And it is also, some of those crimes are within the power of the state, or even just within the power of the state. But they fail to do it. They are unable to do it. They are waiting for somebody to do it in Abuja, and they hold somebody in Abuja responsible for not doing it. And we've challenged them. You have the power. I've seen Kano State has its own anti-corruption agency now, so Kano can even afford to do it. Other states have the power to also institute such a mechanism and commence the process of trying those who are suspected.
And perhaps that says much about some of these commission of inquiry or panels now set up by some states, where the panels have returned indictments now against some serving ministers. But the question is, why have they not taken these cases to court?
They have the power to do it. There's nothing stopping them from, but he's just telling you clearly that some of those things are done for the political expediency, for political campaign and for smear campaign. Otherwise, nothing stops the Attorney General of the states to institute those actions against those who are being indicted.
In your opinion, what exactly does this government need to do, you know, to well, should I say, reinvigorate the fight against corruption? Now, what exactly would an organization like yours want to see?
Yeah, we would want to see, like I said, a genuine commitment to the implementation of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, such that you can track and then support and even monitor and evaluate what the government is doing based on what it has committed itself to do. We would want to see a serious reshuffling of the cabinet of the current presidents, you know, in terms of the executive. There are quite a number of them that are worst of impediment and even opposition to the president in the cabinet. We would really want to see how the ruling party would put its house in order, such that its control of the National Assembly would be for progressive realization of some of those laudable initiatives that support transparency, accountability, and good governance in the system. And also would want to see enough support for the judiciary. It is not only about just saying the judges should be all right. There must be enough motivation. There must be also enough remuneration for judges, and also the conducive environment for the judges to effectively discharge their duty. So we would want to see where those factors are considered adequately by the government, and agencies of government, ministries of government would be transparent enough and proactive in terms of releasing information to the media, to the public, for them to also evaluate the activities of
Are you surprised that the National Assembly controlled, of course, controlled, if you like, by the ruling party, the APC, would seem to be like an opposition? It's operating. I mean, both the National Assembly and the executive would appear to be operating as opposition parties. You know, they're basically not. Basically, both sides, it would appear, working at cross purposes. One side attacking. They're just basically behaving like opposition parties.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that you see with our political elite here. I mean, there's no ideology in many of those political. There's no ideological background. There's no ideological grounding, and there's no party discipline for quite a number of them. Basically, because of the circumstances under which they assumed positions, and quite a number of them, even in the ruling party, had reasons to have funded from not even their private money, but public money, to have funded the parties and the elections that produce quite a number of them. So it's a free-for-all. Nobody is ready to be answerable to any other body, any other person. So you can see quite a number of them in the party structure are also always going to the public office holder cap in hand for financial support to even run the machineries of the party. So it is not impossible that you would have this kind of circumstances in such a political party that was put together in just like 3-4 years ago, basically not to actually achieve any other thing as at that material point in time,
just to grab power.
To grab power.
All right. Lanre Suraj, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Well, that's it on the program. You can watch it again on our website by going to www.tv360nigeria.com. You'll find this program and lots more there. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/TV360 Nigeria for more videos and updates of happenings, not just on the Dakchi girls now, but developments across the country. You can join us on Google Plus as well. It's at TV360 Nigeria, or like us on Facebook. The address is facebook.com/TV360 online. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at TV360 Nigeria. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.